where people will also perceive payroll, I think sometimes as this sort of, it's an administrative function. Yes, it, absolutely mission critical, but not necessarily an area where it can add value into the employee process or the employee life cycle, employer value proposition. So I think what this is all about really is these innovations that we've just talked about are fundamentally about improving the employee experience, improving the level of engagement, enabling them to understand their pay and have more control over their pay.
Welcome to the Payroll Podcast with your host, Nick Day. Find out what it takes to truly discover what it takes to elevate your career within payroll as we meet with the industry leaders who are shaping the industry for tomorrow.
Hello and welcome back to the Payroll Podcast. Hello to all of you lovely payroll listeners. Of course, my name is Nick Day. I'm CEO of JGA Recruitment, a specialist payroll recruitment firm. And I'm also the host of this wonderful podcast, which of course you can find on iTunes, Spotify, and our very own website, jgarecruitment.com, as well as across all other major podcast channels. Now, today I am joined by Simon Bocca, who after 16 years immersed in the highs and lows of HR and Payroll tech as COO and Chief Growth Officer at Fourth Hospitality, which he helped grow from 5 to over 1,200 staff in the UK, UAE and USA. He has now left in 2020 to realise his dream of launching his own business called PayCaptain. Now, PayCaptain pledges to improve the payroll process and the employee payroll experience. And it does that by embracing the latest technologies, banking capabilities, and the best strategies for employee financial well-being. And I promise you all, there'll be a lot more about that later in the podcast. Now, Simon is passionate about tech. He's passionate about putting the employee first, front, and center. So I'm delighted to welcome Simon today to the Payroll Podcast. How are you feeling, Simon? And welcome to the show.
Hello, Nick. Well, thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be on this podcast with you. So thank you for asking me. I'm very grateful.
Absolute pleasure. Now, of course, you have over 20 years experience developing payroll technologies where you've had first-hand experience at seeing the world of payroll evolve. So what I'd love to do is, we're seeing the world being innovative. What does being innovative really mean, specifically for the payroll function? I'd love to know that from someone with your technological expertise.
Well, I think innovation, certainly over the last 20 years when in my previous worlds, people were innovating or believing innovation in payroll was all about doing things that saves time, doing things to make things quicker, cheaper, and perhaps need less human beings in the payroll processing function. But innovation now, there's so much more opportunity out there for innovating in a payroll function. And I think specifically, those could be things adding more value around core HR KPIs, for example, increasing staff retention rates, increasing staff engagement and satisfaction. Payroll departments can innovate to enable a broader range of capabilities and services that they provide to their employees, or perhaps improving their SLAs to their employees. And yes, of course, everybody wants payroll to be more accurate and more precise all the time. And there's definitely more opportunities around that sort of thing as well. But really, payroll is one of those things that hasn't necessarily been on brand or aligned with company values in the past. It's been seen as this administrative function that, of course, is highly mission critical and essential to every company that has employees. But the opportunity now to enable the employer brand to embrace the payroll process, I think, is really possible now. With everything that's been happening in the world recently, understanding what the sort of new normal is going to be, and people's approach to work has just changed so much, whether that's because of not going into offices or having much more flexible working arrangements. There is a real need now for payroll to think about innovation and to adopt some of these latest technologies.
I totally agree. I think it's something that, I've been banging the drum quite a lot recently, talking about how now that payroll have more data at their fingertips, more data at their disposal, they can use that creatively. They should be looking to innovate. The employee now has become the consumer, and it's all about engagement. But let me play a little bit of devil's advocate and challenge you slightly then, Simon, because maybe payroll people listening to this will say it's easy for me, in particular as a recruiter, I don't process payrolls, or even easy for you as an innovator on the technological side to say payroll people should be doing more. Yes, they should be using the data more. They need to, think more about the employee experience. But they may also be thinking, when do we have the time? We've got legislation changing daily, particularly at the moment with COVID-19 legislation and the furlough scheme always changing as well. They may have experienced payroll transitions in the past, which have been real time steals, again, taking them away from their day-to-day responsibilities of keeping a payroll accurate. So let me ask you this, if I may, and I know I'm playing a bit of devil's advocate here, but is there really scope and time for payroll professionals to be innovative? Should that innovation fall on their shoulders as their responsibility?
Well, you're definitely right. There are a lot of barriers to payroll teams in innovating. And as you said, that all of this recent legislation change and also lots of HR policy changes. So the payroll departments are already having to do a lot of change, but it's reactive change in many instances. The coronavirus job retention scheme and having to adapt to that, and all sorts of other things like IR35 as well. These are changes that have put a lot of pressure on payroll departments to react. But unfortunately, some of those changes are, although they're mission critical and essential, they haven't been changes that sort of radically change the experience for the employee or generally improving the payroll process. But there are many other barriers, really. In particular, I think payroll people are exceptionally busy. There's quite often a lack of resource, and certainly people not sitting around with time to think about what to innovate. There's also quite a lot of fear around changing things in the payroll process. If it's not broke, why fix it? A lot of people will have, real horror stories about changing payroll providers. And, traditionally and historically, there used to be real challenges with doing that. And because it's such a mission critical part of the business and where precision is really required, words like creativity and innovation are sometimes not aligned with payroll, and those two words don't necessarily come together. There's quite often a low desire to change. It's the natural position to sort of stick with what you know, and as well as that, with many previous investments and complicated integrations that the payroll software might be embracing, is also quite scary, really, to think about disrupting any of those things. And especially when there's so many other things going on, so many competing priorities. The HR function typically will be focused on also driving a lot of change within the business, and again, specifically now. So it's very difficult to find the time to innovate and also know what to innovate with. One of the other challenges that we see is that there really is very little imagination or new stuff coming out from existing payroll providers. Of course, there's some really exciting new companies around that focus on the cloud and focus on a really nice user experience for payroll administrators. But nothing really for such a long period of time has really changed the payroll experience. And that's where I think there's a real opportunity for companies and payroll departments to overcome some of these barriers to innovation. Consider each of the barriers that are sort of just talked about quite carefully and put together the arguments to change and ensure that it's compelling enough and can drive a really good return on investment and add more value to the company.
I think you've hit the nail on the head at the end there. It's about adding value to the company. And I totally agree. And I know I gave you that devil's advocate question, but the reality is if we don't change, then we're not going to raise the profile of payroll any more than where it is at the minute. We're going to need to change, adapt and evolve if we really want to raise the profile. And to do that, we need to improve the employee experience, and we need to be able to use the data at our fingertips to help drive organisational objectives and changes and success stories. But I know that you've got quite a lateral way of looking, in my view anyway, a lateral way of looking at potential innovations for the payroll function. You mentioned a couple of things there. One was, maybe managers, for example, have had a bad experience with a transition in the past. Do you think that the advancements in technologies, which, let's be honest, are rapidly advancing quicker than some of the skills, required to actually work the systems, it's moving so fast, it's made those transitions better now? Is it easier to go through a payroll transition in today's world than it was maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago if someone was considering a change? So I guess that's my first question, but I'd also like to lead to a second question, which is, so I understand that if in order for people to innovate, they may say they haven't got time, but then we also know if they make the time, it might save them time later on. That's kind of the point of the innovation. So yes, you've got to find time now and that's difficult, but if you make these changes, actually this could save you huge amounts of time in the longer term. What kind of innovations do you think payroll people can be thinking about then to really improve the process? And can you give me any examples?
Sure. Okay. Well, first question about is it easier to change now than it used to be, 10 years ago? Absolutely. The HMRC real-time integration process has really helped with this, that those files that are created for every pay run can now be used as part of the onboarding and implementation process for doing the full balancing of payrolls. So that's taken de-risked a huge amount of the pain of onboarding into a new payroll system. And then really with many systems now being much more open and the availability of data and the processes and validation routines that can be done, it does make things a lot easier now to ensure a really safe, smooth transition from one system to another. But it is very dependent on the type of technology and obviously a good project plan to do that. And then I guess the second part of the question around, what is innovation? How can payroll teams innovate and what would they innovate with? When I think about this, I definitely think about it in sort of two buckets, really. There's innovation that will benefit employees and there's innovation that will benefit the employer and specifically the payroll department. So to talk about the employees, first of all, which is what I'm really, really passionate about, is creating a payroll experience, the experience of getting paid. Again, on the basis, it's one of life's most important things to have a job and get paid for it. Payroll departments have got such a big responsibility to do that well, to do that accurately, to do it on time, but also to make it on brand and to make it in line with the way people live their lives today. So the first thing that I wanted to say around this employee part is really the opportunity to embrace faster payments. So faster payments have been around for quite a while now, but many payroll operations haven't been able to take advantage of that functionality. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. And there's definitely a lot more sort of compliance and red tape, certainly if you're outsourcing it. But the opportunity with faster payments is specifically for employees is that there's the potential to, receive payments outside of the normal payroll processing cycle. There's the opportunity to send faster payments to non-traditional bank accounts as well. So whether that's to credit cards or to loan companies or other third parties with an appropriate reference number for the beneficiaries. And combined with some other functionality, which I'll mention in a moment, this is where I think employees can take some more control of their pay and be able to access some of their pay or pool some of their pay in different ways. So leading on to that, there's something called e-money regulations, which is part of the whole improvements to the banking industry, where money can be pooled that belongs to employees and pay can be sent to e-money accounts. And that can be used for savings or splitting some of pay in line with how the employee would like to receive their pay. So this is an area where people can, create a rainy day fund, perhaps, or they could have a savings pot that they're trying to put together for holiday, or just a fund of money that's separate from their main bank accounts maybe separating some money that doesn't get into their joint account at the end of every month. So e-money accounts, I think, is an interesting piece because there's all sorts of opportunities around that, or creating a Christmas fund or a pool of money that staff welfare fund and this sort of thing. So companies can really think around how they can use these e-money accounts. I think mobile technology has, obviously, we're all using mobiles on a day-to-day basis. We're all receiving push notifications endlessly and using QR codes. This is also an area where I think there's room for innovation in the payroll area. An example of that can be, combined with faster payments. If an employee has received a bonus halfway through the month, they could then have that prompted to their phone to ask them, what would you like to do? Congratulations, you've received your bonus. Would you like it to be sent to your account right now? Do you want it to be sent to your savings account? Do you want to send it to a charity or split it into a charity? Or just wait until the end of the month if you can't decide what to do? And those are sorts of things where, enabling payroll to be more in tune with actual individuals and the experience of receiving a commission payment or a bonus payment, and really the opportunity of thinking how the employee feels when they've been notified that they get that, and having the chance to receive that money instantly could be great. And similar to that on maybe expenses as well, just another example, as soon as you've incurred an expense and paid it on your credit card and your manager's approved it, why shouldn't that be then notified you immediately? Your expense payment has been approved. Where would you like to send the money? And send it straight to the credit card that you used. So those are just a couple of areas where I think that faster payments combined with mobile technology can create a different experience for getting paid.
You mentioned mobile tech in quite a lot of detail there. Something, and maybe this is already happening, and maybe the payroll managers out there can drop me a message if you're already doing this. Maybe you're already ahead of the curve. But what about the communication and messaging channels then? We're so used to talking about payroll people only ever receiving complaints about pay, right? They very rarely get calls to say, hey, you got my pay right this month, thank you so much. And typically the inquiries they do get will always be by the traditional communication methods, which will be telephone or by email. Do you see the future then? Because let's be honest, it's very rare any of us are away from our mobile phones for any real length of time these days. We kind of live and breathe through our mobiles now and our smartphones. Do you see the future then as well of payroll communications being through sort of similar mobile-based channels and WhatsApp, maybe in-app or video type channels? Or is that already happening perhaps? I'm not too sure.
Well, definitely. I definitely do because, yes, the traditional way is phone or email or maybe some sort of ticketing system in the company intranet. So I do think there is a real opportunity to embrace, things like WhatsApp and also video messaging. And now, especially as we're so much more used to, using Zoom and this sort of thing. And also the technology now does allow for this, call centers or payroll operations teams, payroll service teams. You can easily interact now with WhatsApp and video and have it all beautifully logged in case management systems and that sort of thing. And that I was going to mention that on the employer piece as well, where integrated telephony and integrated case management with payroll solutions can absolutely speed up the entire process and enable payroll professionals to communicate really easily and with a modern messaging or modern method of communication rather than that sort of old email style way of having to communicate and the delays associated with that. So having a little bit more on-demand communication between payroll teams and their employees, I really believe in.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned, of course, that you were going to split it into two things. I may have cut it off. I did apologies. I was keen to ask that question. You've talked a little bit about some of the innovative things that payroll people can think about for employees. You've just mentioned then that communication and messaging was something you were going to talk about for employers. What other ways can payroll people innovate then from an employer's perspective?
Well, again, just to mention faster payments again, replacing the legacy 3-day BACS processing cycle. There's obvious benefits to that, being able to be a bit more, a lot more agile on making payments to employees. Whether that necessarily changes the payroll approval cycle, that may not be the case and aligned with other payroll processes, etc. But having the opportunity to get money to people quickly with faster payments that are integrated as part of the payroll solution, I think can be one of the key things and benefits of innovation in this area. So many people now have either moved to the cloud or considering a move to the cloud, and all of the benefits that can bring, and significantly reducing the cost of payroll processing. But also now the open APIs with these cloud technology providers is really key. So enabling data to go in and out of payroll systems in a really robust and secure way means that, well, there's lots of benefits and depending on the integration, but the movement of data and the interaction with payroll data, whether that's for reporting or dashboards or being able to get more reward information and benefits information straight into the payroll. Of course, that's about time saving, but it really is much more about having great processes that improve accuracy and then ultimately enable really good analytics and reporting and dashboards for payroll professionals so that they can really understand what's going on in the organization. Whether that's pay gap reporting and all the different elements associated with pay gap reporting, and being able to sort of look at this data and be more strategic of making decisions and being able to pinpoint into areas that need focus. And again, in this area, there's so much around, prompting people with the information they need. So rather than having to think about, I should run that report at the end of the month, these dashboards or these insights can be prompted to payroll professionals so they can take action when they need to without having to trawl through loads of reports. And I think it really is sort of a bit linked to that, the whole piece around AI, and there's still quite a lot of confusion about what does that actually mean. And what I see this can really improve or help with in the payroll function is to improve accuracy and improve process compliance. So AI can analyze data and it can find potential issues with data in the payroll process. And it also can guide and suggest for specific actions to be done around data to ensure that people do get paid properly. So we are using AI specifically to do those two things, to ensure the quality, not only of just individual payments and deductions and certain calculations, but also to ensure that everything is done effectively as part of the pay run cycle. And I think this is an area that will only get bigger and add real value so that actually payroll professionals can be using brilliant analytics and dashboards to have better conversations, whether with HR and finance and leadership of an organization, to drive better pay strategies and reward strategies and adding more value into the organization.
I have to say, people will know this from me already. It's something that I think is absolutely critical for raising the profile of payroll in the future, is taking advantage of the analytics at their disposal and using that creatively, using that to help drive, and support organizational objectives at board level, or whether that's with, as you say, with HR, finance, or other areas of a business. Something I'll be interested to know from yourself, Simon, you've worked as a COO, you've worked at that level. If I'm a payroll manager listening to this at the minute and go, okay, I take everything on board, I want to innovate, I want to adapt, I want to evolve, I want to introduce some of the things Simon's talking about there, maybe I've got some of my own ideas, but where do I start? Who are the stakeholders typically that would hold the purse strings to some of these changes, that would allow these changes to go through? Should I be going and speaking to my HR director, my finance director? Is it bigger than that? Should I go and approach my CEO and say, look, this is where the payroll department can really add value? What would be the next stage you would recommend if I'm listening to this and going, okay, I'm ready to make some changes, where do I start?
Well, I think this definitely does depend on the organisation that you're in. And just back when we were talking about some of those barriers where people are quite scared sometimes about payroll because of how important it is, and where people will also perceive payroll, I think, sometimes as this sort of It's an administrative function. Yes, it's absolutely mission critical, but not necessarily an area where it can add value into the employee process or the employee life cycle, employer value proposition. So I think what this is all about really is these innovations that we've just talked about are fundamentally about improving the employee experience, improving the level of engagement, enabling them to understand their pay, have more control over their pay, be more part of the process of being paid. So I think that it's important to really articulate the other KPIs that these innovations are going to benefit, which traditionally, as I said earlier, payroll innovation has been about trying to do things quicker and cheaper with less people. The opportunity now is to drive more change, bigger change across the whole organization. And that's what this innovation can do. So I do think it's about working in partnership with HR specifically and finance to create the compelling case that either we need some more resource in order to be able to do these things, or we need to convince the IT function that this is actually a very glamorous project, and it is safe to do it, and educate them on how payroll processing works and why these changes are important, and the benefit to the employees, and therefore the benefit to the organization. So I think it's a team effort, really, with HR right at the forefront, but then finance and IT being real supporters of the change and the benefits of the innovation.
Excellent. Well, there you have it, listeners. You've got a platform and a foundation there to create your next project plan should you wish to innovate within your function. Well, listen, we're going to jump to a quick advert break, but when we come back, we're going to find out more about the part payroll can play when it comes to supporting employee financial well-being. So stay tuned.
Have you ever asked yourself, how can I recruit payroll staff effectively? Please don't give up on your recruitment project just yet. Here at JGA Payroll Recruitment, we appreciate the difficulties associated with attracting, recruiting and retaining top payroll talent. We also understand just how costly a poor payroll hire can be. JGA Recruitment are a niche payroll recruitment agency who will partner with you to resource payroll candidates who will improve both the accuracy and efficiency of your payroll department. Contact us today on 01727 800 377 or visit jgarecruitment.com to find out more.
Well, welcome back. So, Simon, in many companies, let's be honest, payroll can be quite a struggle. It can be disconnected. The legacy tech doesn't always add value. It doesn't always work for the way people live their lives today. We've talked a little bit about some of those elements already. Now, with the launch of your new system, which is PayCaptain, you are hoping to provide a payroll and financial wellness solution that really tackles the heart of these problems. So I'd like, if you can, just to tell me a little bit more about the tech and the thinking that's gone into this solution, and also just tell our listeners a bit about how it can both improve the payroll function and also, of course, the most important thing I know from your side, which is the employee payroll experience.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, we've created PayCaptain to bring together payroll, banking capabilities, and financial well-being, because payroll, as we've talked about, as you've mentioned, can be disconnected in an organization. And sometimes this legacy technology just doesn't, support a great way for people to receive their pay. Money gets paid into their account in the middle of the night. Pay slip gets produced that so many people don't look at. And I believe just that whole experience and that process has got the opportunity to be so much better and be aligned with company values. I think payroll has always been this part of the employer value proposition and the employee life cycle that hasn't had the opportunity to be on brands before, be aligned with values. And that's what I really wanted to do with PayCaptain. And specifically, financial well-being is a buzzword at the moment, but it's also really, really important. And the evidence is compelling for organizations to understand employee financial wellness and the impact it can have on their workforce. So there's a huge amount of statistics and research out there that many people will have seen, whether it's from Ernst & Young, Close Brothers, CIPD. It's there. And there's some striking, information in there. So Close Brothers, their report from last year, something like 86% of employers believe that staff worry about money and it affects their performance at work. And then in that same survey, finding that 94% of UK employees admit to worrying about money. And of those, 77% say that money worries do impact them at work. And there's a lot of calculation around the cost of poor financial health in an organization that affects absenteeism, presenteeism, productivity, and staff retention. And Salary Finance, their report, it talks around that's a cost of 13 to 17% of total payroll costs. So the evidence around this is compelling for organizations, for the leadership of organizations to take note and to understand whether employee financial well-being is having, or financial stress is having an impact in their organization, and what they can then do about it.
Sorry, I think I'm about to answer the question I was about to ask, but which is, so what can payroll, why do you think payroll departments then are best placed to support financial wellness activities? I know this is something that you're passionate about with PayCaptain, and maybe I suspect this is probably what you were just about to say before I jumped in, but it'd be great if you could explain, how you see payroll departments playing a role in this.
Well, I think from a company perspective, first of all, actually, there's 4 key things that companies can do to support their employees. First of all, it's about education. We know, and the research suggests, that so many people do struggle to understand money in general, whether that's really complicated pension schemes, and whether the coronavirus job retention scheme payments, or tax and national insurance, and how to manage money effectively. So there's a huge amount of information and advice out there, whether that's the Money and Pension Service, some of the debt charities, and a huge amount of information on social media, and some great accounts out there that really helping to educate people. So signposting or providing financial education inside the organization, I think, is the first priority. The second priority for companies is to provide some sort of tooling or features that enable people to manage their money. So whether that's a money budgeting tool, or a facility to understand your pension pot, or the facility to access some emergency cash before you've accrued it. Those sorts of things can help financial well-being of the employees, but it's an actual tool. It's something they can do to help improve their financial resilience. The third thing I think companies should do is to encourage, to inspire, to motivate, to incentivize their financial well-being in the organization. So again, there's all sorts of things that can be done there, and helping employees take control of their pay that they're earning from the company. And then lastly, I think there's a real need to measure financial wellness within an organization, so that also you can pinpoint where the challenges are, because it isn't uniform, and it may not be where you may expect financial stress to be sitting in your organization. There's research to show that it does affect all salary buckets. It adversely affects certain demographics of gender or race or disability and region. So it's important to be able to pinpoint where financial stress lies within your organization, listen to employees, and then be able to track that over time, so that your financial wellness initiatives are actually making improvements to people's lives and KPIs within the company. But specifically, payroll departments, ultimately, payroll people are probably the most trusted people in an organization. We know that they're numerically literate and highly capable, and probably people that are actually themselves very good at managing their money And of course, because it's payroll, they're immediately the most relevant people to potentially support with financial wellness initiatives and activities in a company. So again, I think what I've seen historically is sometimes payroll functions, whether that's in-house or outsourced providers, payroll professionals or administrators, when they're processing payroll, they're creating pay slips, they're processing the pay. But I think there is an opportunity for those people to think more around, not creating pay slips and processing payments, but actually fulfilling a exceptionally important role of putting money in people's hands, and therefore could offer more services around that and be more supportive, be more helpful around people being able to manage their hard-earned money that they've just received from their company. Now, again, all of this goes back to some of those challenges we talked about with innovation, and resource is a major factor there, and training. So broadening the role of a payroll function to encompass some financial well-being type initiatives is obviously another investment in an organization, but it's an investment in an organization that companies should consider and should understand. And I think that the organizations that do put these controls in place, these initiatives in place, whether that's within the payroll function or not, do see positive benefits, do see improved staff retention, and do see improved employer satisfaction as well.
For me, listening to this, it almost seems, for those that know me personally, they'll know I'm quite passionate about supporting those who are suffering from mental health conditions anyway, due to my own experiences. But it almost seems strange that this hasn't been identified earlier within payroll, that companies haven't considered financial wellness on a more critical priority scale, if you like, and why some of these things haven't been thought about before. I guess it's amazing that better late than never cliche, really, that it's being thought about now. And it's certainly from PayCaptain's perspective, I think it's a phenomenal aspect of your software to be able to support financial well-being in such a way, because you're absolutely right. The statistics don't lie, and finance has such a major impact on mental well-being that if we can get that element right, and we're going to end up with a much more engaged, happy workforce that isn't affected by some of the issues that you've discussed. And it just seems strange to me. And I've been in payroll recruitment now for nearly 20 years, and yet it hadn't even occurred to myself that why aren't we linking financial wellness to payroll a little bit more? But it seems to be now, as you say, a bit of a buzzword right now, and rightly so. I think some of the work that you've mentioned there, some of the innovations you've discussed about where companies can support their employees is absolutely on point. And I think it's absolutely relevant and brilliant that you brought that to the show today, Simon. So I really do appreciate you talking about that in such detail, because sometimes people can overlook it and we can gloss over some of these elements. But the reality is, if we can really improve financial wellness for people, it's going to make a huge impact on people's lives. And, we know with COVID, anxieties are, at their maximum level right now, and people are struggling. So I think it's a fantastic thing that you're highlighting there. And I do think employers and payroll departments, hopefully in the future, can do a lot more to support it. With that in mind, and obviously with the eyes that you have for innovation, the eyes that you have for the future of payroll and tech, I would love it, if you may, if you could just summarise how you see the future of payroll.
Well, I do see there being these big barriers that we talked about earlier on that need to overcome. But the opportunity is there to innovate, and the opportunity to improve the financial wellness of the employee workforce is there as well. So I'm hoping very much that organizations can do this and really embrace some of these technologies that are out there, where other sectors like banking in particular have really done that. And that's where I see payroll really has got this opportunity to now embrace these technological advancements to add more value in their organization, be more strategic, support their employees better, and sort of morph into this sort of new world, this new normal, the new approach to work, to add more value and really improve some of those core KPIs around people and retention and engagement and satisfaction. And ultimately, the payroll process has got the opportunity to make their company a better place, make their staff more engaged and improve the financial well-being of them as well. So there's a big opportunity to innovate. It's a big opportunity to embrace financial wellness. And I think this will make the experience of getting paid something that's fit for the modern world.
Excellent. Well, I think we've taken that full circle. So we're gonna open the vault here for you, Simon, and I know that listeners are going to be intrigued to hear what you've got to say.
Entering the vault.
What's one piece of advice you would give to someone working in payroll right now?
Keep calm and carry on, I guess, with all of with everything going on. It's a difficult time for sure, but doing such a brilliant job with keeping the country paid. Just keep calm and look after yourself, really, I think, is the biggest piece of advice I would say.
Perfect. If you had the power of foresight and you could change the entire payroll industry with one action or one improvement, what would that action or improvement be?
For me, this is all about, making the technological change to put employees in control of their pay and help people, understand their pay better and modernize that process.
I suspected that might be where your answer led, because I know that's the dream you've had in launching PayCaptain in the first place, which is exactly the problem that you're trying to solve, which is, I probably could have predicted that, but it's a brilliant answer nonetheless. In hindsight, what's one thing you now know that you wish you had known when you began your career in payroll technology?
Well, one of the key issues that I see really now is that payroll is complicated and it hasn't ever been really articulated brilliantly from an employee perspective. So things like pensions as well, it's so confusing. It's this sort of mysterious thing that has never been articulated properly. People don't understand what their pension pots are. Many people don't understand, what the tax calculations or national insurance calculations are and how to budget. And I think that that's the big opportunity, or I wish it was better 20 years ago, that it was much more helpful, much more easier to consume and to understand your pay and your benefits better. And I think technology could have done that historically, but it didn't.
I think that's a fantastic response and a great way to finish today's podcast. We've gone full circle. So thank you so much, Simon Bocca, for joining me today on the Payroll Podcast. Of course, if people do want to connect with you online, where would you recommend they go? Where can they find out more about the PayCaptain solution?
Well, thank you, Nick. That's kind. The PayCaptain website, paycaptain.com, and my email is simon@paycaptain.com.
Excellent. I will, of course, add a link to your LinkedIn profile as well if people want to reach out through that platform. So listen, remember everyone, if you have a payroll-related vacancy you would love some specialist payroll recruitment support with, please do reach out to me directly at nick@jgarecruitment.com or give me or my team a call, 01727 800 377. Just leaves me to say another huge thank you to Simon for joining me today. Thank you, my great listeners, for joining me again on this podcast, and I look forward to bringing you all the next episode of the Payroll Podcast real soon. Take care of yourselves and each other. Till next time.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Payroll Podcast with Nick Day of JGA Recruitment. If you need help with a current payroll vacancy, then please get in touch with Nick and his team. All contact details can be found in the episode notes. In the meantime, to make sure you never miss a future episode, please subscribe to the show through any of your favourite podcast channels. Till next time.